Okay, just wait a second before you start for Mr. Morrison. Sit down. Okay. Okay. Right. Do you have any questions at all? Okay. Over to you.
Chairman, colleagues, the Dutch are the tallest, the Luxembourgers are the fattest, the French drink the most, the Greeks smoke the most, the Portuguese are the most susceptible to a car crash, the Finns have the highest rate of suicide. These aren't stereotypes or prejudices, they are the findings of a Eurostat survey. And according to this survey, the average woman will live for 80 years, which is 10 years longer, a 10-year longer life expectancy than since the Second World War. She'll get married at the age of 26, and it's more likely that she'll get married in the north than in the south of Europe. She's 29 when she has her first child. She'll have on average 1.4 children. She'll be 1.65 meters tall and weigh 50 kilograms. All of this evidence might just seem anecdotal, but this study also does contain some serious data. For example, women earn on average 90% as compared to men. And there's a significant group of people in Europe that live below the poverty line. The Eurostat survey has also shown a significant decrease in the number of people who get married. I thought marriage was making a comeback, but that would seem not to be the case. But of course, people still fall in love. But when they fall in love, this doesn't necessarily lead to marriage. And for centuries, it was the case that love and marriage didn't necessarily go together like a horse and carriage. In fact, with large families which had a lot of land and were very wealthy, they tended to be in favour of organising their marriages, of organised marriages, rather than marriages based on love. It was only in the 17th century that people started to reject this practice. Or this is what started in the 17th century, and then in the 19th century was when we saw a more general reevaluation of the situation and the idea of people getting married because they fell in love. It was only really the sexual revolution in the 1960s that was the main revolution in this concept. In my country, the number of people who are getting married is falling. It was 64,000 marriages took place last year, and 35,000 this year. And it's the same in the north and south of the country. Also, the amount of time that people remain married for is falling, and the number of divorces, the divorce rate, is increasing. In fact, Caesar said something about this, about Belgians, and about them having the highest rate of divorce, and and in fact they do have the highest rate of divorce. It's about twice the European average. In fact, on average, Belgians tend to stay married for only 40 years. It used to be the Scandinavians that were at the top of this league table, but the Belgians have now taken over. They're well ahead. Why might this be the case, though? Well, but the reform of divorce law, the divorce law has been changed several times, most recently 1 year ago, and it's thanks to these, and perhaps the increase in divorces is thanks to these changes. The cost of divorce and the time that it takes for a divorce on the basis of mutual consent, that has all been reduced. But more people are separating, more people are separating everywhere, and perhaps we have to look more deeply for the reasons for this. A French psychoanalyst wrote about this and said that the trouble is that people expect more from a marriage than they're prepared to give to it. In fact, it seems that optimists stay married, that pessimists divorce, and so that means that Belgians are very pessimistic.
Dick, since you were listening to the interpretation.
Yes, well, that was interesting. I must say that after I made a real effort to follow what she was saying, I managed to extract, for the most part, a plausible message. It was clear that the divorce rate was going up. It was clear. Most of the figures at the beginning about life expectancy when you had your first child, that sort of thing, seemed to make sense, okay, for the most part. But I did have to make a real effort. And because I was making a real effort, and the effort was due to the fact that she didn't seem to either want to communicate or she wasn't able to communicate very well. She hardly ever looked up. And so I really had to go out there and say, what is she trying to say? But having said that, for the most part, it made sense. There was one stage where she seemed to go off the rails completely towards the end there. The bit about Caesar and the divorce rate. To say the least, that's a bit of an anachronism, isn't it? I don't know whether the speaker actually said that, but I'd be very surprised, actually. And then the fact that Belgians are only normally married for 40 years. I remember the old song, being together for 40 years. I think that's almost a world record. It can't have been 40. That doesn't seem to make sense to me. So that was one part which didn't seem to be plausible at all. And then coming back to the effort I had to make, it was also because sometimes her choice of words was rather strange. Now, I know this is more form than anything else, but I have to make an effort. If she says the Portuguese are susceptible to a car crash, it doesn't immediately mean much to me. And then when she talks about organised weddings, well, most weddings are well organised, and then I realised it was arranged weddings. So there were occasions where, because the way she said it, either the choice of words or the fact she wasn't communicating, I found it difficult to really get into it. Having said that, most of it was plausible, but there was one thing that completely went off the rails, and I'd quite like to know what was actually said then.
Okay.
If you could just come in a minute, if I can, Terry. Did you understand the ending? What did you understand her to be saying with the conclusion right at the end of the speech? The bit about optimists and pessimists and so on.
I thought that was quite clear, actually. She said, what did she say? She said that there are, people who are optimistic stay married. People who are pessimistic tend to get divorced. In Belgium, there are a lot of divorces. QED, the Belgians are pessimistic.
In fact, it's exactly the opposite.
She got it completely wrong.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so summing up then, it wasn't too difficult a speech, but on the strength of that she didn't pass. I'm sorry you didn't make it. But it's not all bad news, because we thought you had a lot of potential. The simultaneous was a good beginner's standard, we thought, but the consec, there you were let down by, we think, your note-taking. But Nick's got a few more comments on that.